to give you, they cower in the fetal position out of fear of talking about the things that we do. I'm Chris Spags, joined today by a man who's currently at the Sports Betting World Championships for DraftKings. So you're going to hear a lot of fun noises in the background. Mr. Alex Baker, better known as Osmo. How are you doing, Alex?
I'm doing well. Looking forward to talking some playoff football. I know some of the other guys doing content, they weren't in it for the long haul, but we're still here, and we're giving you the deep cuts that you're going to need to win this week.
Yeah, as Alex mentioned, we are going to be here, by the way, through the Super Bowl. We're going to keep doing the show because a lot of the shows out there just stop. They think once there's only 4 games left, you don't have to keep going. But we'll keep going. We'll keep bringing you contrarian picks as best we can. And, of course, to do that, I'm joined by one of Roto World senior editors, one of the premier minds in football analysis out there, Mr. Evan Silva. How you doing, Evan?
Hey, what's up, guys? Really excited for this divisional round slate. You know, this is widely considered, and I agree with it, the best actual football weekend of the year. A lot different from last week because last week we had a lot of low totals. This week we had a bunch of high totals, beginning with the first game. It kind of sets up similarly to last week because, you know, we all like that first game, and we're going to love this first game, you know, Kansas City against the Colts. So, you know, there's, again, like a psychological aspect if you're playing the full slate. I know that FanDuel has like 2 main slates, one on Saturday, one on Sunday. Their Saturday through Sunday isn't their main slate. But, you know, I play like every single slate that they have. And, you know, they ultimately have 4 slates. I'm playing them all.
Yeah, so there are some options. When we talk about ownership today, by the way, we're talking about ownership for the Saturday and Sunday slates, though we will have ownership for the Saturday and Sunday specific slates on the site at osmo.com as well. Use promo code Contrarian to get 50% off your first month if you want. Get all the ownership projections and rankings, not just NFL, but for all the sports. PGA is starting to crush right now. NBA has been doing well all year, so check that out now, promo code Contrary. And real fast before we get into the meat of the show, we are sponsored again by Fantasy Draft, so thank you to them for presenting this show. Fantasy Draft has lower contest fees than all the other major providers out there. They're guaranteed to give away 25% of the payments to 25% of the folks in the field, which is different from all the ones out there. A great way to build bankroll if you're a new player. Use promo code Contrary and you'll get $5 free on your first deposit. So go check it out now. Go to fantasydraft.com or download the Fantasy Draft app on your app store of choosing. Alex, what would be a good reason for folks to go to Fantasy Draft this week?
Well, I think a great reason is that they have lower site fees than other sites. You're saving 5-6% of your money every single time you enter there. If I had 5 or 6% more ROI over the course of a year, I'd have like a private island by now. But Fantasy Draft, they're hooking it up with more generous structures because their whole thing is being player first.
Yeah, so go check out that player first app at fantasydraft.com or download Fantasy Draft now. And again, promo code Contrary will get you $5 free on your first deposit. So take that, build your bankroll, go take advantage of the sites that want to help you out. So go support Fantasy Draft, support the show. All right, let's get into it. We're going to go game by game here because we only have 4 games, and it seemed like that worked well last week. As Evan mentioned, this game's going to be a popular one. It's the first one up front. The highest total on the slate, rather. The Colts and the Kansas City Chiefs currently projected to be the highest owned guys here. We have Patrick Mahomes, who's going to be the highest owned quarterback on the slate. Damian Williams also currently projected to be one of the highest owned running backs on the slate. Tyreek Hill, obviously, Travis Kelce, all the ownership you're expecting. On the Colts side, T.Y. Hilton going to be one of the highest owned wide receivers. A little bit less ownership on Andrew Luck and Marlon Mack, as well as Eric Ebron. Alex, how are you finding this one from a pricing perspective? Are you seeing any guys who jump out to you as being extra worthwhile?
Yeah, I think this is the game of the week. It's kind of like last week with Indianapolis and Houston, except better. The total of 57 is among the highest we've seen all season. And anytime Kansas City is on the slate, I mean, it's the most electric offense in the NFL. So fade at your own risk, right?
That does seem like that would be the case here. Evan, how are you feeling about this one breaking down? You've talked a lot about the Colts defense and how they do some creative things to keep the ball in front of them. One would think that could inhibit Tyreek Hill, but he is Tyreek Hill. How are you feeling about how this one breaks down?
I mean, you know, these are the best teams left in the NFL, and the Colts are like legit. They're good on offense. They're good on defense. They've got a legitimate running game. They've got a really good offensive line. They've allowed 14 points per game over their last 8. You know, these games are hard, really difficult to predict, like from an outcome standpoint. You know, it's not like the regular season where, you know, we know, or we have at least like higher confidence levels in terms of how game script is going to go. And game script is going to determine so much. And it's really hard to predict the game script in this one. I mean, look at how much game script determined last week's result in the Colts Texans game. I mean, comes out guns blazing. You know, Ebron comes out guns blazing. Luck looks like a great play, you know, for most of the first half. And, you know, Marlon Mack ends up being like the slate breaker because they just rode him all game. Nyheim Hines, who I saw some big time best pros, like played him in cash on FanDuel. He's not necessarily like a FanDuel play, but he was 4,800, you know. But, I mean, he didn't even play. He had 9 snaps. You know, so much was determined by the flow of the game. That's going to continue to be the case, but these are harder games to gauge in terms of game script than a lot of regular season games are. So I don't know, and I think it goes back to, you know, you're kind of like telling yourself a story. Hey, you know, if Mahomes comes out rocking, you know, and Colts, they're going to struggle to cover Kelsey, you know, and you know, they're going to build a big lead. Then Hines could be in a bounce back spot. You know what I'm saying? Like, just kind of trying to tell yourself a story and trying to guess the game script and building that into your lineup, I think is going to be, you know, I think is going to be critical this week.
So I guess let's talk about some of the outcomes for this game then, because I think one which makes sense to me based upon how the Colts have been attacking it. Marlon Mack getting a ton of touches recently, over 20 touches his last couple games. Are they going to possibly try, or can they even potentially squeeze the air out of the ball, run it with Mack a bunch, at least try to keep the Chiefs off the field? I mean, the Chiefs are pretty bad versus the rush, and it does seem like a spot where they should be able to accomplish that. But, you know, it's a home game, obviously going to be a high-energy crowd over at Arrowhead. How are we feeling, Evan, about Marlon Mack being one of the backs who are going to carry the load this week?
Yeah, I mean, he has the best matchup of any running back on the entire slate, you know. And we just saw him produce in a situation where he had the worst matchup of any running back on last week's slate. I mean, the Texans have had a great run defense, and it didn't matter. What mattered was game script. What mattered was the play of the offensive line with Ryan Kelly back. You know, what mattered was, you know, their commitment to the running game in the second half of the game, and also to Marlon Mack's talent. I mean, he's really developed as a runner over the past couple seasons coming out of UCF. He was more of a boomer bust guy. He's become a much better actual runner, and he played 80% of the snaps. Now, that was in large part due to the flow of the game. But it's like, you know, if they do fall behind by, let's just conservatively say 1 score, you know, is he going to stay in the game, or is Hines going to come back in? That's the question mark that remains with Marlon Mack, because he has not been heavily involved in the passing game. He didn't have more than 2 catches all season until week 17, where he had 3 catches for -1 yard. So, you know, he has not been a big-time passing game contributor. But, like, they've been playing him more, so it makes you wonder, hey, you know, if they do fall behind, would they stick with him, or would it be a bounce-back spot for Nyheim Hines? I mean, he's got the best matchup of any running back on the slate.
Alex, so let's talk about the other side of that. Well, actually, first give me your thoughts on Marlon Mack, and then we'll talk about maybe another outcome for the Colts.
I think Mack, as we saw last week, he has a ton of potential just because he's getting so many snaps if the game flow works out. As I've been talking about game flow kind of influencing the distribution between Hines and Mack and going back, because fortunately the Colts, we've had several samples where they've been in spots where they're really incentivized to win pretty much every week in the past few weeks. If you go back 3 weeks, so week 16 and week 15, Nyheim Hines saw about 1/3 of the snaps in each and ran routes on about half of the passing plays on average. If that happens again, then that could be a pretty nice spot. But I think that more likely Mack will get a lot more snaps than Hines, so he's a much safer play. But if you think Hines is going to be low owned and you think that the rest of your lineup kind of plays into the game script that would be required, I think it could be a great play.
So let's talk about an outcome then where there's a little more reliance on the pass game. T.Y. Hilton, obviously a guy's going to be popular. I did the DK Live show yesterday where we were previewing the NFL weekend. Not to cheat on the contrary, obviously, I'm a man of many shows. But T.Y. Hilton, there was some points raised by the guys who were on there about how T.Y. Hilton's been pretty bad outside for the most part. In fact, the only time that he's done well away this year, other than one game at Washington earlier in the year, was another dome game versus the Texans. Evan, is there any concern for you with T.Y. Hilton outside here? Do you think that maybe the Chiefs can limit him, or just the brisk Kansas City air and I guess potential snow maybe?
Yeah, in his career, he averages 25 yards fewer per game outdoors. And he averages about, like, his touchdown probability is almost cut in half when he plays outdoors. So it's not an ideal situation, obviously. But like with that said, we've got a massive total. We've got a team that is projected to be playing from behind based on the spread. We have, we have T.Y. Hilton, NFL receiving yardage leader since week 10, facing a Chiefs defense that has allowed the most 20-plus yard completions in the NFL this season, and just got shredded by so many wide receiver units down the stretch. I mean, Mike Williams, who really didn't do a whole lot all year, had a monster game against them. And it was Tyler Lockett and Doug Baldwin in that Seahawks game. And it was just Robert Woods, Josh Reynolds, and Brandon Cooks all had big games against him in that monster shootout in week 11. It was just every single game, opposing wide receivers were having monster games against Kansas City. Teams that played Kansas City this season averaged the most pass attempts per game in the NFL. They averaged almost 40 pass attempts per game. So, yeah, I mean, there's this one, data point that suggests that maybe T.Y. Hilton isn't, as good of a play. He's not an ideal play. We're not getting him at Reliant Stadium. We're not getting him at Lucas Oil Stadium. Man, there's a lot of good data points on him too, way more than there are negative ones.
Seems fair to me. Alex, how are you feeling about T.Y. Hilton's prospects in an outdoor matchup? Alex?
Sorry. I'm trying to mute it because of all the ambient noise here. I think that he's going to be one of the top wide receivers of the week. I mean, there's some good ones on the slate, but the Colts have one of the highest projected passing yards of any team, and Hilton receives a huge share of that. So I think if you want to get Hilton in your lineup, you have a green light as far as I'm concerned.
Alex, is there anybody on the Colts side who jumps out to you then as a potential Hilton pivot? Hilton projected for 32% ownership, whereas Inman is projected for 14%. Chester Rogers projected for 8%. Do any of those guys stick out to you? Or Eric Ebron as well, 19.5%.
So if I was going to go to one other guy, Ebron always doesn't play, but with Kelsey on the slate, I slightly prefer Kelsey. And then you got Ertz and Gronk. So there's some good choices at tight end. Wide receiver, I think that either going to Rogers. He got pretty good work in the last game. He didn't get a ton of snaps, but he's a decent value play. And then Dontrell Inman, his price is a little bit higher. Those guys are both in play. But I'd probably play them in the stack with Locke in that. A ton of one-offs.
All right, seems fair to me. Evan, any of these guys jumping out to you between the secondary pass catchers for the Colts?
Yeah, Inman has been great. We talked about this last week, but did see one fewer target than Chester Rogers, and the pricing disparity between those two is maybe a little bit too much. I think that Chester Rogers is still in play as a cheap dude. Ebron, the Chiefs they got killed by tight ends all year. Eric Berry doesn't really matter at this point. He's not really someone that we should worry about. He kind of had a setback season, after trying to return. Ebron, again, he was kind of doing what he wanted to in the first half last week, and then in the second half. So what was he, like 3 for 26 and a touchdown? That's what he finished with. Like, if the Texans could have been at all competitive, I think he had a much bigger game, but he didn't. But I think that he's still, very clearly number 2 in line for targets in the Colts passing game. So I think that he's an awesome play. I think that he's also clearly behind Kelsey. So, maybe on DK, would you think about playing Kelsey and Ebron? Kelsey Kelsey tight end, Ebron in the flex, or I think that you could I think that would maybe be one of your better options.
That's actually, I built a couple lineups just to kind of get a feel for the slate, and that's actually one which I went to a couple times. It's hard because I think you might want 3 running backs, but I do think as a contrarian play, these are the 2 best tight end matchups according to DVOA, and obviously these guys both can see volume, both Kelsey and Ebron, so I think that's an intriguing one. Alex, would you play 2 tight ends in a GPP if you're making your lineups?
Yeah, I think it can be a great move. One of the core things you want to do in fantasy is differentiate your lineup from other people's. And part of how you can do that is you put 2 players together that might not be on the same team in many rosters. Putting 2 tight ends on the same team is a way to do that. I'm not sure it'll be super contrarian this time, but definitely a lot fewer people will have the combo of the 2 of them compared to each one individually.
Let's talk about the Chiefs side before we move on. Pat Mahomes, as I mentioned, going to be the highest owned quarterback on the slate. Damian Williams up there as well. Anybody who we feel uncomfortable about, Alex, who you're not trying to roster? Williams is a very cheap play, but maybe doesn't have the upside of Zeke and Gurley and even Melvin Gordon. How do you feel about rolling with him as a chalk play?
So based on what I've seen in our ownership projections, Damian Williams is supposed to be one of the most popular players this week. I'm assuming everyone agrees with Evan's conclusion from his matchups column that Damian Williams will be the number 1 guy. Spencer Ware, having been ruled out as a healthy scratch on week 17, that kind of indicated that he's second by a lot. I'm not convinced yet, so I have a little bit more skepticism that Damian Williams will just get all the work and Spencer Ware will be a lesser part of the offense. So if you want to be contrarian, maybe you could play Ware and hope that people are just reading the situation wrong. I think that there hasn't been a lot of reporting about these guys and what kind of role they're going to have in the playoffs. So that could be one spot to gamble because whoever gets the bulk of the workload is going to pay off big, most likely in this game.
Evan, how do you feel about that with the Williams-Ware split in the backfield or non-split potentially?
Yeah, well, shout out to Awesemo, the greatest DFS player on the planet, for checking out the matchups column this week. Much appreciated.
Everybody reads that. I always see media people like, oh, Evan Silva mentioned the matchups column. So I feel like you're used to that now. The red carpet all reads the matchups column.
No, well, I am skeptical that Ware is going to play. I don't want to say that I think he's not going to play because I just don't know. But he was full practice leading into that Week 17 game, and then he didn't play. And this week he's limited practice, which is less practice, questionable, and I don't know if he's going to play. So I'm just not sure. In that final game, Tyrell Williams did get 11 carries. Now that was a 35-3 blowout win, where the Chiefs pulled starters as soon as the fourth quarter began. So I'm not going to try to read into that. Into the Tyrell Williams suddenly getting, a bigger role because a ton of those carries came in the fourth quarter. But man, I don't know. I think that and the good news is, that we are going to know if Spencer Ware is playing before any of the games start. But I would not be surprised if he's listed as inactive on Saturday afternoon. And then, that probably bumps Damian Williams' ownership percentage way up, even higher than it's projected.
Yeah, so something to keep an eye on for news there. And let's talk about the pass game here. Mahomes, again, obviously going to be the highest owned quarterback in the slate. Travis Kelce, we've talked about, has a fantastic DVOA matchup and could also be a good matchup as well in terms of the Colts defense and keeping passes in front of them relative to Tyreek Hill. How do we feel about the pass game? We also could have Sammy Watkins back. I think he's still questionable right now, but the assumption is he's going to play. Alex, which pass catcher do you feel the most comfortable with out of this Chiefs attack?
I think the big question mark here is Sammy Watkins because he hasn't played in a couple months. The last game he played, he only played like a few snaps, and there's some big questions like about his health. But maybe he'll be this week's Kiki QT, and the price is right. On DraftKings, he's 4,500. On FanDuel, he's 6K, pretty medium range, and on Fantasy Draft he's 8,800, which is even lower than DraftKings. So we've seen this season that Sammy Watkins can have a slate-breaking performance. So I think that there hasn't been much kind of information about how he's going to slide back into the lineup, but I'm just going to assume that he's a full go until I hear otherwise. And with that, I think that he's going to be in a lot of my lineups. And then, of course, Kelce and Tyreek Hill are total studs. I don't think you need anyone to tell you to put them in your lineups. It's just a matter of kind of picking the one that goes off this week.
Evan, which of the pass catchers would you say you feel most comfortable with in a stack with Mahomes?
Kelce. I mean, I think that he's the best option. If Watkins comes back, we have like a difficult, complementary pass catcher situation to sort through. We clearly have Tyreek and Kelce at the top. Damian Williams is heavily involved in the passing game and should be heavily involved in the passing game against a Colts team that is willing to concede, running back catches because their primary focus is on preventing big plays. And so that's why you see him get hurt all the time by RBs and tight ends and slot receivers. So behind Tyreek, Kelce, and Damian Williams, now we would have Sammy Watkins, Kelvin Benjamin, Demarcus Robinson, Chris Conley, and even number 2 tight end Demetrius Harris, who plays a lot of snaps. So that's a lot of dudes, complementary dudes to sort through. We have not seen Sammy Watkins play a full game since, I believe, week 9. And when he did return, it was in, I think, week 11, against the Rams, and he lasted like 5 snaps. So it is a very similar situation to Kiki QT. You can be willing to take that risk. You know what you're getting into. This dude has not played in a really long time.
Yeah, with the total where it is, and I think the ownership where it is, it could definitely make sense to have some exposure to Watkins. But for all the reasons I think you guys have outlined, it's not a guy to load up on necessarily. Just because, he could just get knocked back out. He might not be as ready as he thinks he is. And I guess we'll find out in short order there. Let's move on to the next game on the slate. Dallas at the Los Angeles Rams. Rams 7-point favorites there. A matchup that should benefit Ezekiel Elliott, 5.1 yards per rush allowed by the Rams. Also, ownership-wise, Zeke is the guy who's projected to be the highest-owned running back on the slate at 35% projected ownership. On the other side, we have Todd Gurley projected to be the highest-owned guy on the Rams side. 32.5% projected ownership on DraftKings. Jared Goff, Robert Woods, Brandon Cooks, all a little owned, but not quite super owned. Alex, how are we feeling about this game, and who are the guys who you're feeling most comfortable with?
So I'm always intrigued by Goff. It seems like the public's been off of him, but we saw at the start of the season that he has some big potential. The Rams have the 3rd highest total, just by a couple of points. And one of the things I like about stacking the Rams is the workload is very concentrated between 3 players. So the chance that Gerald Everett or Tyler Higbee gets all the usage is pretty low. So you're pretty safe going with Gurley, Cooks, and Woods. And then Reynolds is kind of an interesting dart throw. But I really like going there, especially if Evans' trend has maintained that everyone thinks Goff kind of stinks. Because if you look at the season as a whole, the evidence points to him being pretty decent at football.
Evan, how are you feeling about Jared Goff being decent at football? How are the polls shaking out for Jared Goff?
They change every week. We never know. Goff, it's consistently people hate him. He's one guy that people are dead set on not liking.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah. I mean, I just think that there are good things about him here. He's been great at home. 21 to 1. I don't want to say the 22 to 3 touchdown to interception ratio at home, 10 to 9 on the road. He has been not as good versus zone defenses. That's really been kryptonite. Teams started playing him a lot of zone against him late in the season, and he wasn't as good, although he did play a zone defense in week 17 against the 49ers and shredded them 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. And that's the style of defense that the Cowboys run, cover 3. The Cowboys have a much more talented team, defense. But and he's got the receiver core should be all back to full strength. They really needed that bye. They were banged up on the O-line. Whitworth was banged up. Gurley obviously has been banged up. Late in the season, they showed a couple of different looks. They've been 3 receiver, 11 personnel, just straight, But then in the Week 16 game, they played 2 tight ends a lot, and they scaled back Josh Reynolds. And then in Week 17, they came back and played Josh Reynolds a ton. So that could maybe help them a little bit just to keep the Cowboys on their toes. The Cowboys gave up a lot of big plays late in the season. They gave up some pretty big games to quarterbacks. Eli had a good game against them in Week 17 without Odell Beckham. Cody Latimer had a big game against them. Last week, Russ was only allowed to complete 18 passes, but 5 of them went for 20-plus yards. Tyler Lockett, he did his damage against them. Alshon had a good game against them with Carson Wentz late in the season. So after that game where they shut down Drew Brees on Thursday Night Football, it was like 13-10 win. That was really when people were like, "Oh shit, the Cowboys are for real," But since then, they haven't been quite as good in pass defense. Only 7 sacks over their last 5 games, and we want Jared Goff to be in a comfortable pocket because that's really where he has struggled really consistently since he came into the league. Like the home road splits, they could, you could kind of give or take. Actually, last year he was better on the road than he was at home. So that's, that can very much just be variance or opponent driven. But with the under pressure, he has significant splits when he has been clean and when he has been under pressure. And we want to see him clean in this game. And the Cowboys pass rush has not been as good, and this Rams offensive line is back to full strength after the bye week.
So which of these pass catchers are we feeling the best about? To me, and this is me as a Cowboys fan who's watched a lot of them this year, and also I think we just saw it last week with Tyler Lockett, and not so much with Doug Baldwin, where the speedier receiver who's able to get into space with just sheer jet burner speed, I think is the guy who's going to beat them better. So I like Brandon Cooks here, especially at 5% less ownership projected on DraftKings than Robert Woods. But Alex, which of the wide receivers do you feel best about? I think Josh Reynolds too, also a little interesting for that reason at just 10% ownership, and you mentioned him. But if you had to pick one guy, Alex, to pair with Goff, which one would you pick?
I think Cooks and Woods are grading out pretty equally for me. That might come down to the matchup, so Evan would be the expert there. Reynolds, I think, is a little bit too expensive on DraftKings at 4,500. You need him to get, on average, like 50-plus yards to kind of justify that price. But on FanDuel, he's easier to get to at 5,600, which is a little bit lower because they have higher price salary floors. So I think that that'd be how I handle him this week. But another guy that's kind of just a dart thrower, I don't think you're getting a big edge one way or the other if you have him in your lineup.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And also, Josh Reynolds' catch rate noticeably lower than the other guys, 55% on the year compared to 69% for Cooks and 65% for Woods. Evan, how are you feeling about the pass catchers here? If you had to pick one, which guy would you feel the most comfortable with?
I mean, I think it's real clear that like Woods is the cash game play and Cooks is the tournament play. Based on the way that their games are, the A dots, A dot is much higher for Cooks and catch percentage lower, catch percentage and consistency super high for Robert Woods. Does Robert Woods have a 150-yard game in his range of outcomes? I'm not so sure. I think we all agree that has a chance to get there, to do what Tyler Lockett did last week. He didn't have 150, but he had 120. And, if Cooks can add a touchdown onto that, that'd be a really big score. And he's cheaper. I know he's cheaper on FanDuel. And I think his ownership is going to be less because he's just been quiet for a while, kind of. He did have a 2-touchdown game in week 17, but nobody cared about that game. Nobody paid attention to that. And he hasn't hit 100 yards in a while. But I'm with you that his kind of like speed and quickness game, that might give the Rams their best chance to get around those big cowboy, cover 3 cornerbacks. I think the matchup is kind of, I think that Woods has the better matchup, but I don't think that Cooks has like a scary matchup at all. What do you guys think about Gerald Everett? Because he had 6+ targets in 3 of his last 4 games. He only had 1 target in the week 17 game, but I know he's really cheap on DK, like 2,700.
Alex, what are you thinking about him? He's one of my 2 preferred cheap guys. There's one other guy who I would go to, but I'm more inclined to pay up at tight end this week on DraftKings. Alex, any Gerald Everett for you? You mentioned him a little bit above.
Yeah, I think that he's great at his price level, especially on DraftKings. On Fantasy Draft, he's a little bit more expensive relatively, and same on FanDuel DraftKings. So I think that I'm playing him on any site, it's going to be DraftKings, but he's in play on every site. I think that it's clear that he's the pass-catching tight end over Higbee. You can project him for some pretty decent workload this week. And if you want to go super contrarian, you could go double low-price tight end, and I don't think anyone's going to have that.
Ooh, there we go. Now we're going contrary. Now we're living up to the name of the show. Going with the Gerald Everett, Hunter Henry lineups. That's where you make the money. Let's talk about the Dallas side. As I mentioned up above, or I guess a few seconds ago, Ezekiel Elliott, the highest on running back in the slate at 35%. Actually, no. While we're talking about Ezekiel Elliott, and we didn't talk about the guy who's probably most important on the Rams, Todd Gurley. Let's just do this right now. Which of these 2 guys would you rather have, Alex? Ezekiel Elliott or Todd Gurley? Both projected for very, very similar ownership and at similar prices.
Let me check. I might have to go back to my spreadsheet here because I messed up with
the tough choice. You don't want to make this one wrong, Alex.
I mean, if they're at similar price points and similar ownership projections, then you go to your guy.
Oh, there's similar price points. I mean, I think you gotta go with Gurley then. But give me a second here, and I'll crunch some numbers and give you a better idea.
Evan, while Alex is crunching his numbers, which of the guys would you feel most
comfortable? I always thought that Osimo did all the stuff in his head,
Unfortunately not. He's not. He is a human computer, but not to the extent of actually picking a player between that, unfortunately.
Yeah, speaking of which, he's tried to take a lot of credit for the Michael Crabtree 2-touchdown game last week. And I've been thinking that the credit really goes to whatever he was drinking last week.
The 90-minute IPA is known to fuel the greatest minds in daily fantasy sports.
Well, here's the thing is, if you want to make a good lineup this week, then drink all day IPA. Sponsored content.
If you had touted Crabtree and Kiki Cutie, then I think we could officially say that there's a strong correlation between fantasy and beer. All right, so what, Alex, do we have a verdict?
I have them projected about the same, which is a little bit surprising because, I mean, over the season, Todd Gurley has been such an amazing player. But I think that you could go to either one, and who wins the game is probably going to really influence which one scores more points this week.
That makes sense. So yeah, some different approaches to take if doing multiple lineups there. Evan, is there any issue you see with Ezekiel Elliott? To me, this looks like a pristine matchup for him. The issue is really more about the game getting away, but he still does have that pass game involvement. So like, I'm comfortable with him, but especially with his price down a bit, though everybody's prices are down a bit this week. But there's obviously some risk of the game getting away. How are you feeling about Zeke, Evan?
Yeah, I mean, I love Zeke. You know, I really like Gurley. My goal has been to try to get them both in. Mm-hmm. You know, it's a little difficult, you know, especially when you play Mahomes and Kelsey. You know, I really bite the bullet on some dudes, you know, to get both of these guys in. But that has been my goal. I've found a couple of ways to do it. You know, we're gonna have to take some risks, you know, throughout the rest of our lineup.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on there. And I have in my lineups that I've been tinkering with, force a little Chester Rogers in there, force some of those cheap guys who maybe have some upside, a little Josh Reynolds. But I think there are ways to get there, but it's definitely going to be a tight squeeze. Alex, how about you? What are you feeling about Ezekiel Elliott, and what are you feeling about the Cowboys' offensive prospects here with the lowest team total on the slate?
Yeah, I think that despite their team total, you can totally play them. Amari Cooper seems like someone that, for some reason, people haven't given him credit for what he's done so far this year. It's much better priced on FanDuel than DraftKings. On DraftKings, he's 6,500. On FanDuel, he's 6,500. So he's going to be easy kind of chalk play on FanDuel. On DraftKings, so he's way harder to get to. But I think that you could make some nice game scripts here where you pair Cooper with Gurley, and then if the Rams run game does well, then Dallas is going to have to pass more, and then Cooper would be a likely candidate for that workload.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Evan, how are you feeling about Amari Cooper and a potential Dak Amari stack, which will be very under-owned on the slate? And if the Rams get ahead, could be a situation where they're playing from behind and Dak picks up some rushing equity and some passing equity.
The matchup of like Aaron Donald and the Rams' ability to create interior pressure is very concerning, I think, for Dak Prescott and receivers that rely on downfield routes. Because like, you know, if you're getting pressure up the middle, your pressure is coming real quick. And this Cowboys interior O-line is not in good shape. Joe Looney, their backup center, who is playing, you know, in place of Travis Frederick, who hasn't played all year, is 35th among 39 qualified centers in Pro Football Focus's grades. Their right guard, Zack Martin, may be the best pound-for-pound offensive lineman in the entire NFL. When healthy, has not been as healthy this year, has dealt with MCL sprains to both of his knees. And their left guard, Connor Williams, they opened the season with him as their starting left guard. Then they benched him for ineffectiveness. They put in Xavier Suafilo, and he, you know, playing in this meaningless Week 17 game where, you know, Jason Garrett, like, I still don't know why they did that. It gave the Giants better draft position. You know, it was just not a well thought out plan. I mean, you know, they got the win. Dak had a big game. They won their first playoff game, so I guess they could look at, you know, the results and the outcomes and feel good about it. But it was a weird decision. Xavier Suafilo suffered a high ankle sprain in that game, and, you know, he didn't play last week. Connor Williams remained a liability, and Connor Williams is going to be out there again, this time in a much more difficult matchup where, I mean, the Rams can line, you know, freaking Aaron Donald up on him time after time after time after time, and that is worrisome for the Dallas passing game. And it actually might help Zeke by, you know, forcing the Cowboys to get the ball out of Dak's hands more quickly and to the running back who can get out into space.
So what do you think then that opens up any of the other pass catchers? Cole Beasley kind of banged up, but he is the short target guy there. Is that somebody who could be a contrarian play, only 3% projected ownership and under 4K?
Well, it looks like Cole Beasley isn't going to play. So,
is he that? Okay, I didn't see that status.
Yeah, it looks like he might not play. And you know who the Cowboys' backup slot receiver is?
Tavon Austin.
Tavon Awesome.
Oh boy, that's a guy you could bank on in a playoff situation. Sure.
It was minimum price, man. It was minimum price.
The revenge game of all revenge games, this would be.
Yes. So I think he's on the radar. I mean, I think he's kind of in the mix. It also looks like Jarwin is not going to play. These guys were DNP all week. There have been reports that Tavon Austin was lining up in the slot, first-team slot receiver all week long. And then the next man up for the Cowboys is Dalton Schultz. Dalton Schultz, rookie out of Stanford, really hasn't done very much this year, in the passing game, but he's earned like a lot of snaps. He has had games where he ran a lot of routes. I think he would play every single snap in this game against the Rams if Blake Jarwin does not play. So those are your real, deep, cheap, opportunity-based, guys that, hey, if you want to jam in Gurley, Elliott, Mahomes, Kelsey, whatever, like I think that you kind of got to look at guys like that.
That makes sense. Any cheapies on the Dallas side intriguing to you at all, Alex?
Yeah, I think that Evan's spot on with Dalton Schultz. I think that if Jarwin is out, then Dalton Schultz will be a really nice play because, he's a high draft pick last year, and I think that looking at the numbers, he's run routes on about 3/4 of his snaps, only pass blocked on 1/4 of passing plays. So I think that that makes a nice kind of high volume potential workload.
All right, so there we go. So that's the summary on that game. Let's move on to the Chargers visiting New England. A lot of narrative stuff about Phillip Rivers never beating New England in various ways and on the road, and New England's home success in the playoffs. And really everything seems like it's piling up against the Chargers. But I'm not sure, and actually Evan maybe or Alex, one of you guys can confirm this. I feel like I've heard reports about the Chargers getting a lot more public money than the Patriots are right now. Though that might be from self-hating Patriots fans who just want to appear to be the victim and have everybody against them. But either way, not a lot of ownership on this game. Only 20% projected ownership for Melvin Gordon. James White projected for 24%. Everybody else under 20. Alex, how are we feeling about this one with the Chargers heading east?
Let me double check my numbers here. I'm kind of intrigued by the Chargers. They haven't had to pass the ball a ton recently because of game script. But a matchup with the Patriots could be with the doctor order for Phillip Rivers. The one thing is, he's only a FanDuel play this week. Just the way the pricing shakes out, I'm only getting him on FanDuel and not DraftKings or Fantasy Draft. I'll have to look into it a bit deeper to understand that because I'm getting Keenan Allen on all the sites. But I think that the Chargers have had good production per passing play this year. The Patriots defense is good, but it's not the Ravens or anything. So I think that it could be a nice sneaky play if the public isn't on them.
Evan, how are we feeling about this side? And also talk to me a little bit about Melvin Gordon, who there were some troubling stats about his how he's performed since coming back from that knee injury, but it has been less than favorable matchups, and obviously they haven't needed him to the full load that they might need him here. How are we feeling about the Chargers side and Gordon?
Yeah, I mean it's a difficult game, I think, to handicap as all these games are. I think that if you would have asked me in like week 10, I think I would have said the Chargers win this straight up. I think that they were a better team at that time. They've gotten the job done, but man, Phillip Rivers is outside of the last 5 minutes in that KC game. He just has not played that well for like an extended stretch, and this is like a trend over multiple years where Phillip Rivers does not play as well late in seasons. The dude is pretty old. So maybe that could be a contributing factor. I don't know. Maybe it's just, variance, but, certainly it could be opponent driven as well. I mean, he had to play the Ravens twice in there, but I think it's going to be like a low scoring kind of grinded out game. Melvin Gordon, again, terrifies me with his health issues. I mean, comes into last week's game with a high ankle sprain and a MCL injury on one leg. In the first quarter, suffers an MCL injury on the other leg. comes back like Willis Reed, is not very effective, but does score a touchdown. So, on a low scoring slate, he like wound up being kind of like a plus EV play just off that touchdown, and so I don't know. I think that if I was the Chargers, I'd probably build more of Austin Eckler into this week's game plan because it's clear that Melvin Gordon is well short of 100%. He is not – and one of the things that was so great about him when he was just rolling week in and week out early in the season was they were feeding him in the passing game. It hasn't happened in a long time. He has 3 targets or fewer in like 6 or 7 straight games. I really, really struggle to play Melvin Gordon.
Yeah, that does make some sense. And yeah, you're right. There were a lot of 8-catch games he had earlier in the year, which is his season average now down to 4.2 catches a game. So that's definitely a steep fall off in the second half there. While we're on this side, let's talk about the 2 Williamses real fast. Mike Williams is a guy I'm intrigued by here because I think the Patriots are going to sell out to stop Keenan Allen because he's really the guy. Whether they stop him or not is kind of inconsequential to me, but I think that's where they're going to game plan. And I do think the Patriots secondary is a little bit underrated. They're giving up the lowest completion percentage on the slate. They've done a good job limiting guys for the most part this year. So I'm intrigued by Mike Williams here. But Evan, how do you feel about these guys, and how do you feel about Keenan Allen's prospects?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's kind of like a lower projected scoring game. The Patriots have like taken steps. First of all, they have a really good secondary. Their defense as a whole is not great, but they have a really good secondary. I mean, Stephon Gilmore, they found this dude, J.C. Jackson, who was like a big recruit and, got into some trouble. And, I think he was recruited to Florida and finished at Maryland. He's like a big, really athletic dude. They took a shot on him. He's been a stud for them in the secondary. They got Jason McCourty for peanuts from the Browns. He's been excellent. They've got Devin McCourty on the back end. So they, Patrick Chung, and they can do 3 safety looks. And what they did late in the season was they used Gilmore on. They shut down like their last 3 outside receivers. They put Gilmore directly on Robbie Anderson, who was just rolling entering that game. He was silenced, by Stephon Gilmore. Robert Foster in the previous game, he was quiet. He did beat Gilmore for what should have been a long touchdown, but lost it in the sun. And then the week before that, they played Antonio Brown, held him, and it was mostly Gilmore, held him to 4 for 49 and a touchdown. That's below expectation for Antonio Brown. Stephon Gilmore was maybe the best cornerback in the league. I think he's going to be on Mike Williams. I think that they will probably use like either Jason McCourty or J.C. Jackson on Keenan Allen with help. And they played 2 guys that were similar to that just kind of run similar routes, and Juju Smith-Schuster and Adam Thielen late in the season kind of kept those guys quiet. And then Tyrell Williams just really hasn't been a big part of the Chargers' passing offense. So I mean, Keenan Allen is clearly the best play. It's priced accordingly. I don't know. Like, it's hard to like fall in love with any of these dudes.
Alex, how about you? Is there any of these pass catchers? Obviously, the information that Evan threw out there might change that perspective a little bit, but any of these guys jumping out? You mentioned Keenan Allen popping in your projections a bit.
One guy I think that's in play in at least on FanDuel is Tyrell Williams. One thing I love is this box score. Watching him doing, he got 3, 4, 2 in the last 3 games. But this is a guy that's out there like every single snap, almost. So I think that he had a couple big weeks this year. They're few and far between, but that's what makes a nice contrarian pick.
All right, that seems fair. Let's talk about the Patriots side before we move on. Tom Brady, under 10% ownership here. James White, as I mentioned above, projected for 24%. Julian Edelman at 17%. Gronk at 11%. Any of these guys, Alex, you're deeply considering? You mentioned Gronk above. I have some concerns about him with the DVOA matchup here, the worst against tight ends in the league for the Chargers. But how are you feeling about this pass catching attack for New England?
So I think that they're not my favorite of the week, but I'm seeing some plays here. I think that I'm not huge on the team stack, but I like some individual pieces. One of the guys I'm keen on is Rex Burkhead on all the sites. He's just the cheap running back this week.
Woo! You get me excited.
I mean, yeah, I think he's kind of a touchdown or bust kind of guy maybe, but that's what you get with a cheap running back. And then on DraftKings, I'm getting some Edelman, but not on FanDuel. On both sides, I think you can play Gronk. I mean, he's not spectacular, but the tight end position has less choices, so I think that you put him in there, that could be a nice pick.
Evan, how are you feeling about the pass hack here? You're excited for Rex Burkhead, so if you want to talk about him, go ahead.
No, he's like not even on my list, but I would just take the L and just donate all the money that I'm going to play to the fine people at FanDuel in exchange for Rex Burkhead having an awesome divisional round game. I'd happily do that. No, I'm kidding, but I like Michelle. I mean, I really like Michelle. I think that if I was going again, and I have very low confidence in picking the sides or anything for this game, but I think that if I was going to pick a team that I had the most confidence in this week, getting the win and maybe controlling the game, it would be the Patriots. I like the Patriots defense. I like Sony Michelle, and they have a great run blocking offensive line. Patriots have one of the top 5 run blocking offensive line according to like tackles for loss allowed and adjusted line rate at Football Outsiders, a bunch of different metrics that suggest that. And they have games where they have dominated with the running game. The best example of that was a game where your boy, also Rex Burkhead, had like 17 touches late in the season. And Michelle had games where, they would ride him just over and over again. We did see the Chargers play a great game with an absolutely fantastic game plan from their defensive coordinator, Gus Bradley, against the best rushing team in the NFL last week in Baltimore. Can Belichick dissect that, and find any weaknesses in that? Will the Chargers do that again? I just think that the Patriots have the best chance. I think that I would put them as the highest probability team to win in the divisional round. I know that they're, according to the spread, that that doesn't align with that, but I think that they are going to win this game, and I think it's going to be under control. And I think that Michelle can get like 20 plus touches in this game, and if he can get there, he can have a big fantasy game for sure.
Interesting. Alex, how do you feel about that? Sony Michelle at 1/3 of the projected ownership of James White could be a nice pivot play. How do you think, Alex?
Yeah, Evan, I gotta disagree with you on this one. It sounds like you've already kind of got the end result pegged out in your mind, but we know in football, like, anything can happen.
I know.
So I'd be a little bit more cautious on Sony Michelle. I think that he's kind of fitting in the Gus Edwards category from last week, where he just he doesn't get passes to him, so that makes him all less valuable in fantasy. And the price is a little bit higher than I think it should be.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm team James White here, so I guess we all have our running back. Alex can get Rex Burkhead. What a deal you got on him. But James White to me looks like a strong play here. I could just see him racking up 10 passes just to kind of keep Melvin Ingram and Joey Bosa at bay. And I think that's sort of where I'm seeing it go, but that could also apply for Burkhead. I do worry about Michelle, though. I mean, I think the points you raised, Evan, about the line play is good. But, those guys were just in the backfield every single play last week versus the Ravens. And obviously we saw the Ravens have a lot of rushing success too. So it does come with some pause there. Anything else, Evan, in this game that we're missing? Actually, you want to talk Gronk real fast? Because I know some people are going to be curious about him.
Your favorite blocking tight end, Gronkowski, Dalton Schultz is a lot cheaper than Gronk.
Wow, that is an insult to the legacy of Gronk and meatheads everywhere.
No, I love Gronk. I think that we've seen the best of him. Unfortunately, the Chargers do not pose a favorable tight end matchup whatsoever. That may, look, I don't know. The Chargers have become more of a game plan defense late in the season, as we saw last week, and maybe they'll just end up sticking one guy on him and then, kind of treating him as an ordinary player, and then he could have a big game in that scenario. I think his ownership is probably going to be pretty reasonable. You could take a shot on him. He's scary. He's got a low floor. He's not getting targets. He might be a better blocking tight end than receiving tight end at this stage of his career.
Interesting. Alex, any Gronk for you?
Yeah, I think that he's in play. He's a little bit cheaper than Ertz and Kelsey and Ebron, who are all kind of like the stud plays. So if he fits into your lineup pretty nicely, I wouldn't tell someone not to pick him.
Yeah, I think this may be Gronk's last game before he takes a rich offer to go to WWE and go into that world. But we'll find out.
We did not mention Edelman. I think that Edelman is clearly one of the better wide receiver plays on the slate. He's got 6+ catches and or a touchdown in 11 of his 12 appearances this season. So that's great consistency in PPR. And Desmond King, although he's an awesome player, definitely concedes a lot of catches. Allowed the second most slot receptions in the NFL into his coverage this season.
All right. Yeah, I'm with you on Edelman. I think he's an interesting play and going to be lower owned than some of the other big ticket guys one of which we're going to talk about next. Before we go into the last game here, make sure to hit that like button real fast. It helps us out a ton here. And also, if you're watching this video after we're live, leave a comment telling us your favorite contrarian player for the slate. Obviously the likes and comments help us out a lot, but it's also curious just to see what you guys are thinking out there. So go ahead, like this video, leave a comment giving us your favorite contrarian play on the slate. And participate. We like the YouTube participation. We appreciate everybody in the live chat right now as well. We are watching there if you have any good questions. Last game, Philadelphia heading into a matchup with New Orleans, a spot where Carson Wentz got really just his dick kicked in last time. But hopefully it'll be better this time with a little Foles magic in the air. New Orleans has the second highest team total on the slate. Drew Brees pretty under-owned with his price being where it is on DraftKings. Alvin Kamara projecting for 32% ownership. Michael Thomas projecting for 26% ownership, one of the higher owned wide receivers on the slate. And on the Philadelphia side, not as much ownership. Alshon Jeffrey at 17%, Zach Ertz at 16%, and Nick Foles with his Foles magic coming in at 10%. And I'm a little intrigued by the Philadelphia side here, but I've also been a believer in Foles magic for far too long now. So, Alex, how are we seeing this one break down for you price-wise? Anybody jumping out? Any stacks here maybe of Philly that you're intrigued by?
So on Philadelphia, two guys are standing out to me. These are both more FanDuel plays than DraftKings. Sorry, I was thinking of the game. On FanDuel, I like Sproles. His price point of $5,400 is one of the lower on the slate, and I think that he's the number one back in Philadelphia until I see otherwise. Especially with Josh Adams kind of out of the rotation for the most part. I think that going to Sproles could be a good move this week. On DraftKings, his price is $4,400, so he's a little bit more expensive relative to the salary cap. And then on both sites, I like Zach Ertz. I like him more on DraftKings than on FanDuel. But that guy, he gets targets as much as anyone else in the league almost. So I think that it could be pretty smart to go there depending on the ownership.
Yeah, 26% target share for Zach Ertz would make him the highest targeted tight end on the slate as well. Evan, how are you feeling about the Philly attack here? And do they have any shot at all of hanging in this game?
I think they do, man. I think they do. I think they are not going to run the ball at all. It's not a good matchup for their running from a run defense standpoint. Saints are very good against the run, and Eagles have a team that is willing to not, really try to focus and jam the run down their opponent's throats when it's not going to work. So what I think that they're going to do is I think they're going to take a very pass-heavy mindset quickly. Since Nick Foles took over at quarterback for Carson Wentz, 4-game sample. He has gotten rid of the ball at the fastest rate in the NFL. They faced some great pass rushers during that time span. The Texans, the Redskins have a really underrated pass rush. Last week, of course, the Bears only had 1 sack. Faced another good pass rush. I can't remember what the first game was, but they have been able to mitigate opposing pass rushes by getting the ball out of Nick Foles' hands quickly. Golden Tate popped up for his most routes run and most snaps in 2 months. They attacked the weakness of the Bears, who have lost. They lost slot corner Bryce Callahan in Week 14 to a broken foot. They spread out the Bears, make sure that Bryce Callahan's backup is on the field. And they went 3 receivers. They play a lot of 2 tight ends. Last week they went almost strictly 3 receivers, and Tate was able to get some good matchups in the slot. And Dallas Goedert had a pretty good game as well. And they were pretty effective, relatively speaking, adjusted for opponent in the passing game against Chicago, with the exception of just 2 bad mistakes that turned out to be interceptions for Nick Foles. But I think if they're going to do the same thing this week, the best way to attack the Saints is to spread them out, go after P.J. Williams in the slot, and I think that's what they're going to do with Golden Tate. I think Golden Tate is an awesome play. Aguilar is going to get a lot of slot routes as well. He was the guy that, he played more snaps and ran more routes than Golden Tate last week, had 2 fewer targets. Recency bias I would expect is going to push people onto Golden Tate away from Aguilar. I think that Aguilar could very well be in a bounce back spot here. Alshon is always in play with Nick Foles. Dating back to last season, Nick Foles has 9 starts where he played with Alshon Jeffrey. And Alshon is at 80-plus yards and or a touchdown in 7 of those 9 games. So I think that they're going to have passing game success, and certainly Zach Ertz cannot do any worse than 2 catches for 15 yards, which is what he had against the Saints in these teams' Week 11 meeting.
Yeah, I think DVOA-wise, both the Saints defense always jumps out to me. They've been better at home, but it hasn't always borne out. But they're giving up pretty decent boosts to wide receiver 1s and wide receiver 2s and running backs through pass catch. I think to me that does kind of interest me in an overall stack here of the Philadelphia side, which presumably nobody will be on, and that is the hammer of the slate. So it's a little intriguing there. Alex, any love for the pass catcher, the wide receivers there? You talked about Zach Ertz, but any Jeffrey, Tate, or Aguilar love?
The short answer is no. I just don't see a reason to go that deep on the slate. I think Jeffrey has been over-excelling, and his price reflects that. And there's so many great passing offenses on the slate that I don't see much reason to go to this one aside from Ertz.
That's fair.
So depressing.
You know what? This could be like the Josh Allen thing where Evan and I are one side and then Alex is just on an island being all wrong. You had your big week last week with Crabtree. Now this is our revenge.
I feel like there has to be some power hour wager. We can get some.
Look, I'm always in for that. I would do that without a wager. Give me the go. Let's talk about New Orleans before we make any bets. We'll see if a bet comes to mind throughout the down stretch here, the home stretch. New Orleans projected for the second highest team total. As I mentioned, Alvin Kamara projected for 32% ownership. Michael Thomas also highly projected here. I think both those guys look strong. Mark Ingram also jumps out under 8% projected ownership right now. Pretty decent price. Philadelphia's run defense, not that great, but their pass defense also not that great. So a variety of ways they can score. Evan, how are you feeling about this New Orleans side and which guys are jumping out the most to you?
Ted Ginn.
Yeah, I agree there.
Are people going to play him? Give me some projected ownership on Ted.
Let's see. Because he has the name Junior in his name, I didn't crop that out, so I don't have our ownership on my spreadsheet, but I'll pull it up while you talk.
Okay.
He's actually almost 50% projected on FanDuel, where he's 4,500. So he's like the second highest owned projected player on the slate there. On DraftKings,
talked about him way too much all week, man.
Yeah, 15% on DraftKings. An interesting play. I like him too. I agree that he does both. He does kind of figure in well with how Philadelphia's been beaten deep quite a bit this year. But Evan, why Ted Ginn? Give the people the reasons why.
Like where to begin? Don't play Ted Ginn, you don't win. I mean, I think it's that simple. Like last week. Oh man, did you guys see the Ryan Griffin miss down the sideline? Oh, that was just the worst of the worst. That was everything was downhill from there.
I was racking my brain about the guy you said it for last week, and then Ryan Griffin was perhaps not. You didn't need him to win last week, I don't think.
No, you didn't. You did not. I mean, the Eagles, like, they get crushed by downfield passing. What does Ted Ginn do well? Ted Ginn took like 3 months off due to a knee injury. He was on IR. They brought him back in week 16. He jumped right into the lineup. He was the number 2 receiver behind Michael Thomas. He drew 8 targets. He had 72 yards. He led the team in air yards. He had like 126 air yards. They rested him for week 17 as they should. He should be, full go in this game. You look at like the areas on the field where the Saints have, or where the Eagles have really gotten hurt. It's like on those kind of deep, like in against their cover 2. It's kind of like on those deep sideline routes, like behind the corner and in front of the safety. Like Allen Robinson made a living on that last week. Traquan Smith made a living on that in week 10. Yeah, week 10 when these teams played. He had 10 for like 157, and he was playing Ginn's role. Ginn has crushed at home ever since the Saints, ever since he joined the Saints, which was beginning last year. His home road splits are massive. I think the game has shootout potential, absolutely. The Eagles have been and I like the over. I think if I was going to bet one thing, in terms of like sides or totals on this slate, I think it would be the over on Eagles Saints. So, yeah, I mean, just a lot of things add up, I think, for Ted Ginn.
Alex, how are you feeling about Ted Ginn and I guess the other pieces here as well?
So I really like him for 4,500 cash, but when you have a boomer bust play that's 50% owned, I think strategically it makes sense not to have him. On DraftKings, I see some other good value options, so I'm not getting there as much.
Sorry, go ahead.
I do like Michael Thomas on both sides. I think that he's been having an amazing season, and he projects pretty well. But I'm not going to be heavy on the New Orleans running backs this week. I just think that people associate Kamara with this like slate-breaking stud, but with him only getting slightly more than 50% of the work, that makes it pretty tough to justify paying like a huge price tag for him.
Evan, do you agree with that take about Kamara?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I do. I mean, yeah. But I think he's also sort of priced appropriately, at least on FanDuel he is. I don't know. I mean, what is he? He's only 400 less than Zeke. He's probably not priced appropriately, I guess. I don't know. I'm kind of like just one-track mind on trying to get Zeke, Gurley, Damian Williams together. So, I'm kind of blinded to Alvin Kamara right now. But, I mean, I'm certainly going to be playing him, like, on the Sunday only and on the, like, late Saturday plus Sunday. I'm going to get my exposure to Alvin Kamara. The Eagles were hurt really bad by pass-catching receivers, by pass-catching running backs this year. When they played in week 11, the Eagles double-teamed Alvin Kamara. So like a quieter game, but that didn't go well for the Eagles, who lost 48-7. So they may do different things this week. I would think that they're probably going to do different things this week.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. It's always hard for a team playing a team the second time in a year, and the Eagles are a well-adapting team, especially with Nick Foles at the helm. So curious to see how they handle it. What about Michael Thomas, Evan? You talked about your Ted Ginn love, but another guy right there, projected for 26% ownership and the highest priced guy, at least on DraftKings. How are you feeling about his prospects?
Yeah, the Eagles double-teamed him too. They double-teamed 2 guys in that game. It didn't go well for them.
You'll leave some people open if you're double teaming 2 guys.
Yeah, right. So, I mean, I think he's an awesome play. He's right there with Tyreek and Hilton and, Woods, I think, is sort of in that mix. Cooks, Amari, but I think that Michael Thomas is very much toward the top of that. I mean, I think he's right there with Tyreek and T.Y. Hilton probably at the top.
All right, Alex, any closing thoughts on this before we go to our contrarian picks and fade of the week?
Well, I think that fading Kamara and Ingram is going to be kind of nerve-wracking because you got to wait until the very last game of the slate. But you gotta go bold or go home.
There you go. So if we're watching Alvin Kamara have a 200-yard game, we'll all feel pretty bad about that. But I'm with you guys. I think I'll have some exposure. I think it's obviously you have to have some just in case he does have that upside. But I would agree that there are better ways to go and spend your money this week, most likely. All right, let's go. Alex, let's give me your contrarian QB. It's tough on these 4-game slates to come up with one, but who would be the most contrarian QB that you like?
Yeah, that's tough. On FanDuel, I'd say Rivers. On DraftKings, I will go with yikes. I'm not going to go too contrarian on DraftKings, I guess. My contrarian play is not being contrarian.
All right, that's fair. Evan, how about you, contrarian QB?
Nick the Big Dinosaur Foles.
Yeah. I too will go with large genital Nick. I think that it's a good spot for him. And look, 10% ownership and a guy who's the cheapest QB on the slate outside of Dak, with all the caveats that Evan gave about why not to play Dak. I think it's a logical play then to go to Foles and hope that they exceed here in a dome, a matchup where the passing attack could take over. Alex, contrarian running back.
I'm intrigued by Spencer Ware, but that might be a little bit too contrarian. So
because he's not even going to play. So let's
Well, the good thing about that pick would be if he doesn't play, then no one can blame me because
you're off the hook.
Yeah.
But, if he had played, he would have a monster day. That's what he can always claim.
Gotta to rely on counterfactuals for this business plan of ours. But I like Rex Burkhead. He's probably third in the rotation for the Patriots, but he's productive when he's on the field. And with that caveat, I think he's worth the bargain bin price tag he has. He's like the cheapest running back you can go to on the slate pretty much.
All right, Evan, contrarian running back.
Yeah, what is Nyheim Hines projected at this week?
He is at 10% on DraftKings, and on FanDuel, he is something else. He is at
probably even lower.
5%, yeah.
Yeah. Him. I mean, and it's just fully fade recency bias. Just fade recency bias. He was heavily owned last week, and he can catch passes, he can make big plays, and his ownership is in the gut because of recency bias.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think you almost talked me into Austin Eckler, Evan, but I'm going to go with Darren Sproles, a guy who I feel a little more comfortable with. I'll stack up my guys here. Oh boy, I might just go all contrarian Eagles here, but Sproles, I think the opportunity, we see him taking over the lion's share of the role. New Orleans not great at defending pass catching running backs, as I mentioned before, and I just think the volume will be there. And hey, got a little revenge too, long-term revenge for his previous stints in New Orleans, so why not?
I don't know. Did you guys end up with much of him last week? Like seeing him get those repetitive goal line carries and just getting nowhere close was real tilting. I mean,
I had some. It didn't go like I would have hoped, but I was mostly off of him. So I just had a little taste, and I was rooting for him. But I didn't think that was.
Okay. So you were rooting for him. Yeah, stuff him. Here please,
I did have a lot of bears. Let's talk about contrarian wide receivers, and then we'll go to the fade of the week to close us out. Alex, contrarian wide receiver for you.
I'll go with Sammy Watkins. The price tag is appealing if he's at full strength. The big question mark is whether he is or not, and I don't think it's a question that will be answered. So that's one where you got to roll the dice a bit. It worked out last week with Kiki Kuti, much to my dismay, not making that mistake again. So at 4% ownership, I think that he could have a pretty good day.
All right. Evan, how about you, contrarian wide receiver?
Man, how about Chris Hogan? He's been a playoff hero in the past. We didn't even cover him, I don't think, on the show. He's going to be out there for every single snap. He had 11 targets in their last game. Let's go with him.
I think that's a strong one, and he is at just 6% projected ownership, so he could definitely get some leverage on the field there. I'm gonna go. Ted Ginn, probably not contrarian enough, but I think he's close. I'm going to go Mike Williams under 10% ownership. I think there are some reasons to worry there, but I think he's a physical specimen who's been getting stronger as the year goes on. And when he gets opportunities, especially if Keenan Allen is blanketed, I think that he could have a day where he helps move the ball downfield and maybe get some deep shots going. So Mike Williams is my dude. Alex, close it out with fade of the week.
I gotta go with Kamara. The main reason is just like I kind of assumed he wouldn't be as high owned because Gurley and Ezekiel Elliott have such bigger workloads and they're only slightly more expensive. But apparently our ownership projections show that he is going to be upwards of 20% on both sites. And that's a lot higher than I have him. So I probably won't have him.
All right, Evan, how about you? Fade of the week.
Are people trying to play Melvin Gordon this week?
20%, so that's fair.
Yeah, fading him. Although, I think that there is a way that he could kind of outkick expectations if the Belichick takes like a game plan where like, yeah, hey, we'll let him run for 3 to 5 yards a pop every play, and we'll sit back and we'll wait for Phillip Rivers to throw us the ball. There is a possibility that they could take that kind of a game plan. But yeah, I think that just with the physical condition that he is in, he might have to play with braces on both of his legs. You like it when you're running back, his from waist down looks like an offensive lineman with braces on both of his legs. No, that doesn't seem optimal. I don't know. Can you build that into your algorithm, Alex, for this week?
Well, I think he's got 2 hands, so he's in my algorithm as a play.
Give him all the cortisone you could find before you get him out to New England. It's like a racehorse. Just shoot him up with everything you can to get him out there. I'll go with for fade of the week. We were good on fade of the week last week. We were all on Chris Carson, so that was a good one to go with. So I don't want to let people down. I'm going to go Robert Woods, 24% projected ownership. I think he's the kind of guy the Cowboys cover best. He's not a ton of athleticism, but they're a team who swarms to the ball, who makes it uncomfortable around the ball. So I think Woods is a guy who I feel the least comfortable with in that passing attack, and maybe you can differentiate by going to Cooks. So I'll go Woods, but that's a tough one. Alex, any closing thoughts for us before I do the ending spiel?
Just thanks everyone for watching. Playoffs are hopefully this week will be better than last, but still a very exciting time of year. And the thing I think people get wrong is recreational player interest is at its highest at this time of year. So when people are regulars and they're kind of trailing off, focusing on NBA, NHL, and other sports, this is as good a time as any to pounce and get your big prize.
All in.
And we will be riding with you guys through the rest of the playoffs, so please keep tuning in. We appreciate the support. Make sure to like the video, leave a comment giving us your favorite contrarian pick. Whether you disagree with any of our picks or not, tell us in the comments, give us the reason why. Keep the conversation going. We'll keep an eye on it. Maybe we'll even jump in for some replies like I do sometimes while drinking later on the weekend. And there we go. Those are the thoughts. Thank you to Fantasy Draft. Make sure to use promo code Contrarian on Fantasy Draft to get $5 free with any deposit. Go support them because they support this show. They help us keep the lights on. So go check them out now, fantasydraft.com, or download the app on the App Store. Fantasy Draft is what it's called. And we will be back again soon. So good luck this divisional round weekend. And go everybody who we picked. Bye, guys.
All right, dudes. See you next week.
Guys.